The thing is, when we start, when we refer to pieces.
Steve, if you can just don't talk. Can you look at Vito? There, that's right. Good.
Well, you can talk.
I can talk? When we refer to pieces, we have to, we can always show slides or we can provide some kind of, we've been, we know these pieces.
But
So we've been providing a real shorthand.
Of the viewers,
it's
we
mystery
should identify
to people.
them.
Yeah, it's going to be a mystery to a lot of people.
We haven't done it.
Don't talk, please.
Oh, sorry.
Steven, can you look at Vito and stay there? Stay, don't move, please.
Where's the job? Here?
Pratt.
So you're going to be, I shouldn't talk now either? You're going to be in Venice.
I think. I'd almost rather not go.
We're up.
Back on the right track. Do you want to mention anything about that Wall Street Journal thing?
Well, I'm not sure if when we talked about it the first time it was on tape or not.
Matter.
But
Does that anyway.
no, I think one thing that struck me with the Wall Street Journal thing is that because it was talking about how uncollectible the work is, I wonder then if it puts the business person in this position of feeling sort of very justified. We don't have to deal with it. It's uncollectible.
Oh, I see. So this guy's just an unbuyable product. So it's not a product at all. It's just a curiosity.
So I don't know.
Like Evel Knievel or something.
Yeah.
Well, you're talking about a front page picture that appeared in the Wall Street Journal.
It was a strange picture, though.
The audience didn't get this from before.
Yeah.
Vito's picture appeared on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. In what month was it? It was around the time that you were having an exhibition here in New York.
No. It was around the time. It was after the retrospective in Chicago. Interestingly, the person who wrote the article was this person who I talked to her when I was in Chicago, and she had done up to then, as far as I'm aware, only agriculture articles, which can only lead me to assume that she's going to deal with every category in the world. So she deals with AG first, then AR.
One might draw, after all. But why did, so there's two kinds of curiosities about it. One is, why did she write about you at all? And why did she think that the Wall Street Journal
I think the reason was simple.
Yeah.
Actually. She wrote, why the Wall Street Journal was the place was I think she habitually writes for the Wall Street Journal. Why did she choose to do the article? I think what happened is that the Museum of Chicago had this incredible publicity thing going, and the person as publicity director, I think, ran into this woman at a party and started talking about it and got this woman interested. The woman knew nothing about the work beforehand.
Well,
but why would she think that was going to be of interest? And I think it has something to do with that kind of curiosity. I think it has something to do with I very easily fulfilled the role of artist as lunatic or artist as strange being in our culture.
Do you think that was the response that people got in Chicago? No, I'm talking about your experience with you had a retrospective of 15 years work or something.
Yeah, 10.
About 12?
Yeah, 10, 11.
All right.
Yeah.
So 10 years of work of this ostensibly lunatic artist who doesn't make objects that nobody can buy, and therefore
There were a
turns
lot
out-
of objects in the museum.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So what
in a
makes you
way.
so uncollectible?
I don't know. I'm not sure. Well, sure, yeah. Of course, we can say what makes me uncollectible. The early stuff, since it was done live, obviously,
Yeah.
is somewhat, uncollectible. The more recent installations have been, for the most part, dependent on a specific space, a specific situation. So therefore, it's not collectible. Even the ones that haven't been, in terms of buyers, they're a little too big to collect, or they take up too much room, or they cause too much trouble. There are any number of reasons.
I mean, wouldn't you say that even at this point in sort of the way art and artists have to operate in this country,
Yeah.
and generally in the sort of art world in which you find yourself, that this is a rather difficult and mysterious way of functioning altogether? That,
Maybe I should talk a little bit about economic situation over the years.
I think that would be nice. And also just about how you understand your whole mode of operation as an artist. I mean, after all, you're not the person who
that's a
stays
bigger
in the
question.
studio
Yeah.
and makes, say, a painting or a whole bunch of paintings and
Yeah.
then comes out for air once every couple of years and
Sure.
hangs them up in a studio.
Yeah.
In a gallery where somebody will then try to
Yeah.
interest collectors and buyers. I mean, you're doing something entirely different. So,
Well,
what
a
do you-
number of people are,
Right.
obviously, yeah. Well, first of all, about the economic situation. Or, more simply, how have I survived? And this
That's
is
right.
probably a model that could apply in different ways to a lot of people. Say, I first started showing with galleries in 1970 when I showed with Gibson, when John Gibson had his Uptown gallery. I guess it was when I was showing with Gibson that I started to adapt myself, or maybe was asked to adapt myself, but then I guess I adapted. It turned out that I sort of did it myself and adapted myself to the usual gallery custom of making documentation of work.
Well, that wasn't so usual, even in 1970. I mean,
Well, it was usual with regard to Gibson artists,
Okay, but
because
that's-
John
that-
was showing Dennis,
because
Oppenheim,
if you
Peter
walked
Hutchinson.
into a gallery on 57th Street and said,
Oh,
I'm an
sure.
artist, they would have laughed.
Sure,
Because they wouldn't have thought that what you were doing was art at all.
sure.
Right?
But Gibson was someone who was, at that time,
Because
doing
what
that
you were
stuff.
doing, could be represented in a gallery maybe by a photograph and a description
Yeah, yeah.
of an activity.
Yeah.
And what were some of those? Well, we maybe we don't
Yeah,
have to go into
yeah.
it. But
But
the
eventually-
point is that you weren't making art after a conception of what that means, what kind of an enterprise that is, by anybody's definition. And you almost were involved at a point in recent history where people were very much involved in trying to almost forge a new identity for what it means to be an artist altogether, wouldn't you say?
Well, sure. I mean, I think when my generation, this is sort of skipping around a little, but I think when my generation first started showing, I think no matter what the surface differences were among a lot of the people in my generation, there was almost this kind of shared assumption. The shared assumption that we were really going to change the art distribution system.
Right.
That because we were doing the kinds of work we were doing, no matter, and the differences were whatever, Mel Bachner, Larry Wiener, Kossuth, Dennis, me, whatever, obviously different kinds of work, but always I think with that assumption that this kind of work isn't work that has been conveniently handled by galleries, therefore the distribution system has to change.
These were artists who, whatever their individual differences were at least doing one thing in common. They weren't playing the usual game of making things and then going to a gallery.
Yeah,
right?
the thing is, though, that I think we did exactly the opposite. That,
You mean you copped out?
well, yeah, or I mean, copped out almost without knowing it.
Uh-huh.
That what happened was that obviously the galleries could show this kind of work. Not only could they show this kind of work, but they could find ways to sell this kind of work. documentation, whatever. So that therefore, what we did was put a gallery in a situation of saying, look, we can even show this. Imagine how strong we are. We're stronger than you ever thought we were because we can even deal with this work that's supposedly unsellable, that's supposedly non-gallery-like.
So you see that
They
you
found it
kind of
perfectly.
invented a new commodity as far as what could be
Yeah,
sold
the
in the
way we
art
did,
market
yeah.
was concerned, and that was yourself and what you do, basically.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, but one thing I think probably you should talk about now
Yeah.
is we accept the fact that the works that they've been shown in the gallery, they're documentations. They're not the works.
Yeah,
Okay? They're
yeah.
documentations. So actually, what you're saying is you are not making an art object like Picasso or like Matisse. You're making a documentation. So
Yeah.
what's going to happen like 50 years from now or 100 years from now?
Yeah.
So we have this bunch of photographs of documentation of somebody called Vito Acconci that was uncollectible. Are the documentations be in part of the book that influenced the culture of the history of art in the later part of the 20th century? Or the documentation through the years will become the prime source of the work?
I don't know.
So it's going to be in reverse, that the documentation will become the work, and what Vito Acconci was doing was just performing for this documentation.
Yeah,
So can you
yeah, exactly.
elaborate on that? Because I think it could be
Or
very
maybe
interesting.
memorabilia, like, famous artifacts of some moment.
Yeah, but it's memorabilia that's almost designed to be memorabilia rather than something that happens accidentally, which is kind of interesting.
It's not just like a pair of shoes, right? It
Yeah,
really,
except that documentation, what would be the most appropriate place for that documentation? Wouldn't it really be in book form, magazine form? In other words, when it's put on the wall, what you're really doing is saying that I want something that's going to sell for $5,000. A magazine isn't. Therefore, if I put it on the wall,
If you have a magazine, the original editions to
Sure.
291 would cost maybe $10,000.
sure, but that's something that happens in other words, the magazine wasn't designed to cost $10,000. It was designed to have a certain purpose. Then, because of influence or because of history, whatever,
Right.
it started to gain a value. By doing documentation for the wall, it seems like you're applying that value beforehand. You're saying, I'm going to make this valuable object.
so you're minting money.
It's a strange
when you
thing.
do it.
Yeah, it's a funny.
Yeah,
But
but
that-
what about the futurists? They were doing performances, right?
Yeah.
All the futurists, they were doing performances, Marinetti, Severini, but the documentations of those performances didn't have any great value now. They are valued as photographs of the work of the artist, of their paintings or whatever. But the photographs, they're more or less remain documentation in a book form.
Yeah.
So
Well, these
what
things
you're saying
that,
about your work are going to remain as documentation, in a book form, or they are going to be seen in a different context, or they are works in themselves.
I think he's saying that there's a much more intimate relationship to these graphic objects that have been produced than simply a magazine photograph of a performance that the futurists might have done.
Well, I don't know. I think what I'm saying
First of all,
is,
he made it himself. He made it to look a certain way
yeah,
and to contain
but
certain...
I think there's something wrong with that, because what's happening then is that something that should be in magazine form isn't. Something that should be in magazine form now is given some kind of art
made
context,
into a
art
precious
institute.
object,
Yeah,
right?
and it,
What, in the
They're
magazine?
sold in limited
No,
editions,
when it's
right?
not- when it's
or
made-
as original works of art.
when it's made on the wall rather than made for a magazine. It's like you're assuming, you're taking art world standards and you're going to say that this now becomes a precious object in
Yeah,
itself.
but this is what you fought against when you
Exactly.
were saying.
Yeah.
So what I found out that the article in the Wall Street Journal, I want to collect that because I think that is going to be something important as a piece. And I kept it,
yeah.
the front page of the Wall Street Journal. I think that as far as the relationship with the Vito Acconci works, has to have that piece of information.
Yeah.
The fact that was in the front cover of the Wall Street Journal, I think for me, has more value than to have a photograph of Vito Acconci performance shown
Sure.
in a
Well,
museum.
maybe,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
that